research and provide a bit of a foundation for our conversation today. So I first want to put up this patient journey map of a family that I have partnered with on a number of different projects. We worked together to create this patient journey map to capture a bit of what it was like to experience a journey of pain specifically. So this is one part of their patient journey map, which is predominantly focused on the pain aspect of their experience in our work together through my Partnering for Pain research program, how it began in childhood and what it looked like as this youth is now a young adult and is transitioning and just starting university. And you can see a lot of roadblocks along the way, a lot of challenges, a lot of interactions with the healthcare system, and a lot of going in circles, a lot of challenges accessing care, and some moments of positive progress and resilience and moving ahead in big and exciting ways with life. But I think I just want to ground us in this. This is a challenge. These families we're working with, we're inviting into research studies, who we want to partner with to improve aspects of their lives and a lived experience. They're bringing a lot, and this is not easy. The lived experience, it's very complicated, and many of us have contributed to making these systems more challenging, inadvertently or otherwise. One of the reasons I also really believe in patient partnership is that it's a really critical way that we can bridge this gap, bridge these kind of valleys of death in health research that are sometimes called, as we move from basic biomedical research to clinical science and knowledge, to what's actually happening in day-to-day life. And many of you are probably familiar with this paper, which suggests it takes about 17 years for research to get into practice, which for all of us working in the pediatric space, that's an entire childhood. So we have a lot of work to do to bridge that gap and make sure that research knowledge is changing practice and getting into the hands of people living with a certain condition or managing with it on a day-to-day basis. I put this picture forward because actually someone I really respect, who does a lot of advocacy and leadership and patient engagement, Julie Drury, shared this with me and as part of another presentation she was giving. And I really think it's important to, and has shifted my language to move beyond patient-centered care to talk more about partnership of care and really seeing youth and family members as equal members of the care team. And I think this also equally applies to us in the context of research. This is where we talk about patient engagement, which this definition may be very familiar to many of you, which is research that's being carried out with or by members of the public rather than to, about, or for them. And this certainly is a patient and public involvement organization in the UK, but certainly much of this kind of definition, spirit, and values is taken up and kind of promoted within our own institutions in Canada, such as CIHR. This is this is a framework that helps to conceptualize the spectrum of patient partnership in health research. It was adapted from a similar kind of spectrum of engagement through IAP2 about engagement of members of the public, but this has been adapted to look at it specifically in the context of health research. So you can see as we move across, there's more involvement of patients and families as members of the team, and more knowledge and time that's needed. And this kind of left-hand side of it is really where traditional research sits. So this is where research is being conducted, and the role of patients and family members is to learn and to be informed, or to act as a participant in a research study. But this is really where we're moving, right? Or where we've already moved, that we need to engage patients and families as consultants, as standing members, maybe of an advisory group, as co-investigators or equal members and collaborators of research teams, or perhaps they're actually in the driver's seat. They're coming with the ideas and they're making the decisions and leading the research activities. And it's really my role, or our role as patient-oriented researchers, to follow their lead, support their decisions, and enable their leadership within the existing systemic structures. And I think I just articulate that I think there's no one right way to do this. I think all of these roles are important, and all of these roles have a place. But the important piece is to recognize that everything that exists outside of that circle, that yellow circle of traditional research, is where we need to be as well, and really empowering greater involvement. If we look, this is an emerging science. So what's the benefit of engaging with patients and families in child health research? I would say there's a lot of discussion, there's some empirical work, but this is something we're going to continue to learn more about as more people do it and more people evaluate its impact. But the research that is out there suggests that it enhances quality, appropriateness, and relevance throughout the research process. So thinking about generation of new ideas to study design, as well as through to dissemination, mobilization of what's found. That it leads to more effective, efficient, and meaningful research to patients and families. So we're actually asking the right questions. It increases the likelihood that research will be taken up in clinical practice, which ultimately will lead to better patient outcomes, and avoids wasting research funds and efforts in areas that are not important to patients. If we evaluate the wrong outcomes for a clinical trial that don't matter to patients in their daily lives, who cares? So we need to really be asking that. In the context of clinical trials, there is some evidence to suggest that partnering with patients and families throughout increases recruitment, and yes, and decreases attrition for longitudinal studies over time as well. So there are direct benefits in multiple ways to partnering with patients and families in this way. The other thing I wanted to alert you to is something called the Patients Included Ethics Charter. So Patients Included, you may have heard about in the context of conferences, which a Patients Included conference has certain stipulations for engaging with people with lived experience as part of the scientific committee and so on. But the Patients Included Ethics Charter can be really directed towards specific research projects, which I think is really relevant particularly relevant for our conversation today. There are a number of footnotes that go with it, but I've highlighted some of the kind of key points or criteria to meet to self-accredit kind of your project or your work as adhering to the Patients Included Ethics Charter. And of course, the ethics charter was designed and co-written by people with lived experience. So that projects are designed, implemented, and evaluated with direct involvement of patients. Project goals are co-created and clearly express their relevance to patient health outcomes and quality of life. Patients participating in the projects are updated about project milestones. Any disability requirements are accommodated in terms of patient partners. And all expenses associated with them taking part in the project as members of the research team are offered in full in advance. And so that's considered and discussed as equivalent to that of other project members in a transparent and ethical manner. And I'm going to talk a bit more about compensation, but because I think this is a really important and sometimes quite controversial point. But as a researcher, and as a clinician, I come to the table with expertise, and I'm paid for that as part of my job. So we need to recognize and value the expertise of people with lived experience and contributing their voice as well. And part of one way you can do that is to compensate. And then that's stated in the public domain unless otherwise requested by patients taking part. So I think these are things you can self-accredit to do this, and just being transparent in your ability to meet this. But certainly this enables some of that respect and some of that movement towards greater involvement and partnership with people with lived experience. This is a commentary, which actually we're really lucky to have Dawn speaking with us today. She has a great deal of expertise in this space, and along with a number of others who are also experts in this conversation, published a few years ago a commentary on patient partner compensation in research and healthcare. And what I really like about this commentary is it's quite pragmatic. Is it actually provides you with some suggestions and guidance around and benchmarks for how you might conceptualize compensation in different capacities. And I'll just say, as a researcher who's partnered with youth and families, this is a really important issue for us to also consider with youth who are under the age of 18 or even in that young adult space, about how we're also recognizing their expertise and compensating appropriately. One of the other things Dawn and I, through another group that we are both part of, have co-authored together along with a number of other patient partners and scientists is a commentary on co-authorship with patient partners and patient-oriented research. And for those of you on Twitter, there's quite some new paper that's out that actually talks about how about 30% of journal editors don't think patients should be co-authors at all on scientific publications. And I completely disagree. And in part, that was it seemed to suggest it was because they couldn't meet the ICJME co-authorship criteria. So this paper really is, again, quite pragmatic and really provides some guiding questions for researchers who are partnering with patients and families around co-authorship, as well as for patients and families about what are some of the questions and considerations they need to have to approach co-authorship and the mutual responsibilities on both sides, but also clearly puts out the framework, the ICJME authorship criteria, and how we believe patients and families can adequately meet those criteria. The other part that I think is always really important to identify is patient partners are not exclusively defined by their disease or chronic health condition and bring a lot of other expertise, professional goals, professional hats that can contribute directly to this work. And actually in the peer review for this paper, someone commented, one of the reviewers commented about how they didn't think that getting a paper was meaningful. A scientific paper was meaningful to patients and families. And we both, I have kind of direct experience in contradiction to that. And I've noticed that particularly with youth, although it's not exclusive to youth, many of whom are interested in pursuing their own health professions or graduate degrees in science areas or otherwise, where a scientific paper is meaningful for multiple kind of goals that they may be working towards as individuals, as well as a family I've worked with and co-authored with who's Indigenous, and how much it meant. She articulated how much it meant as a parent of a child with a chronic health condition for someone from her community to be recognized in this way. So I think we can't underestimate or presume to know the value of scientific output to patients and families. We've also written about this through my own Partnering for Pain research program. This was a commentary we wrote where I wrote with two patient partners, youth patient partners, about our perspectives on meaningful patient engagement to help encourage those in the field I work primarily in about how to do this well and to do more of it. Here's what some of our youth and parent partners have said. Catherine, who's a youth living with pain, being a patient partner has given me confidence by focusing on my abilities. Being on a team of researchers and healthcare providers gives you the sense of having a community behind you, and that we need more of these opportunities Canada-wide. And I also think this is, and compensation is part of this, as an equity lens and bringing more diverse voices into research generally, as well as into patient and family partnership and health research. Part of our ability to compensate also enables people who may not otherwise be able to do so if they don't have the means. I just want to shift and share briefly about Solutions for Kids in Pain, or SKIP, which is the National Knowledge Mobilization Network, for which I'm Assistant Scientific Director. We're a cross-Canada organization. Our administrative center is based in Halifax at Dalhousie University, but we have 4 regional hubs across the country, including in Western Canada, in Edmonton, in Central Canada, in Ottawa and in Toronto, and in Eastern Canada in Halifax. And we're all working together through our network to improve children's pain management. This network came to be because there really was an identified gap between what we know about how to improve children's pain and what's actually happening in the day-to-day world, and that children are suffering undertreated and preventable pain that leads to many short and long-term consequences. And our mission as an organization is to improve children's pain management by working in partnership. So both with those who produce knowledge, people like yourselves, researchers and otherwise, as well as knowledge users, so health professionals. Some of you may be also managers, decision makers, policy makers, as well as many partners that work in this space and in partnership with patients and families. We focus our activities on assessing needs, assessing readiness, resources, and evidence, facilitating institutional change, co-producing tools and promoting those, and increasing awareness and urgency about children's pain. We're a patients-included organization, so we have people with lived experience embedded throughout the governance, as well as working together with us through all of these activities, including a part-time patient engagement coordinator with lived experience herself to support that work. We have many partners that we work with, from small businesses that do graphic design, including my organizations like MyCERN and networks like MyCERN, as well as large pan-Canadian organizations in the health space, such as the Canadian Foundation for Healthcare Improvement. And I just wanted to share with all of you, because many of you may be researchers on this call, and we are very open as an organization and would love to partner with you if your work touches on children's pain whatsoever, which I'll just say might even be relevant if you have blood draws as part of your otherwise clinical trial. Certainly there's a component of pain management there. So we provide, through our Jump In with Skip program, in-kind knowledge mobilization and patient engagement consultation for researchers, letters of support for grants, project partnerships, and have partnered with some people in the co-design of pediatric clinical trials and engaging with youth. So please do reach out if you're interested in that. Here's how you get in contact or learn more. Kids in Pain has a website and is on multiple social media platforms. You can contact us around the Jump In with Skip program or sign up for the Skip newsletter. And then I just put a link there to my own research program. And of course, feel free to email me or to tweet. I'd love to stay connected. So I'd love now to turn it over to Kate, who I think is gonna share some about her experience. And then after Kate and Dawn, we'd love to have a discussion.
For sure. Thank you very much, Katie. And so while I'm pulling up my slides, I had a poll I think I had sent to Stephen, if he can pull that up. First and foremost, I'd like to say this is my first time being able to be a part of a conference. And so this has been a huge pleasure to be able to be a part of a webinar and to be able to speak on my experience and sort of speak as a youth on my own to be able to share. So I don't know if Stephen, do you have that poll?
Actually, did you send it by email? Sorry, Kate. Is it?
Yeah, it was in the original email. If you don't have it, it's okay. I've got my slides going, so.
Let me find it. Keep
maybe
going.
we'll do the poll at the end of the presentation then, just we'll start with that. So first and foremost, I guess, as everyone else has said, I'm sort of coming as a youth with experience and as a youth advisor. And so I'm going to be talking about today engaging youth as partners in clinical research. So the goal today is sort of to introduce you to sort of the groups that I'm a part of that can be sort of useful tools for you guys as researchers or clinicians to be able to utilize in the future if you're looking out for organizations to sort of partner with, and also to sort of give you examples of sort of things we've been able to do as a group and differentiate, really, just like Katie was saying, between sort of involving us, sort of asking us questions versus like really collaborating with us on research. So the first thing I'll be doing is giving you sort of an overview of KidsCan and YPEG, sort of some examples of projects that YPEG has worked on, sort of collaborations with researchers in the past. And then I'll sort of be going more into the best strategies to gain valuable feedback when consulting with youth and young people, and then sort of how to enable youth to give feedback and to actively participate in research. So I'll start with this. So what is actually KidsCan? So KidsCan was initiated in Vancouver, British Columbia in 2012. And it sort of came about when a group of youth were recruited as participants to sort of beta test a mobile application. Although the youth were only involved to provide input on the one study, that sort of created a ripple effect of requests coming from various departments, which has now become the BC Children's Hospital Research Institute. And so these sort of requests came from clinicians and researchers starting to seek out the input of youth in clinical trials and other studies. And thus, from there, KidsCan became a resource as well for international collaborators. And so then aside from direct research input, KidsCan has actually been able to participate in a number of internal and external events. And then in September of 2017, KidsCan actually was able to present at a patient engagement workshop to sort of share strategies on actually how to involve children and youth in pediatric research. And they expanded their reach to include new youth advisors at the BC Children's Health Research Institute. And they were able to develop a training program to train all their new advisors based on the Canadian Institute of Health Research Strategies for patient-oriented research. And then the last thing sort of bullet there is that KidsCan has actually been able to actively initiate self-sustaining research projects, and we're able to participate in the 2016, 2017, and 2018 multidisciplinary undergraduate research conferences at the University of British Columbia. And so then this is where the group that I'm a part of sort of comes in. So KidsCan sort of decide to have to create a national initiative. So the national initiative, obviously, because the group is based in Canada, became nationwide across Canada, and it was aimed to increase the engagement of pediatric patients in all phases of the research process. And so when the group was started, there were actually no groups operating on the national level. So it was really a revolutionary sort of initiative to be able to sort of create something new that no one else had ever tried, which came with its challenges and its and has produced very cool sort of results. And so then with this national initiative, the goal was that Canadian researchers would have access to a unique consultation service and to support their research endeavors. And so the hope is that it would be beneficial for research groups who also do not have a local consultation group that they can access themselves, or a local academic center, or even community-based healthcare facility. And so the goal was sort of that the group would meet on 12 occasions within the year so that they would be able to always be available to any researchers that were looking to gain input. And so the group has been able to design research documents, provide input on the format of research ethics, consent and assent forms, and establishing patient-centered research protocols and methodology. So the goal of this was that young patients would also be able to act as ambassadors, sort of raise awareness of the importance of youth in research, and to also discuss the outcomes for children and youth involved in clinical trials. So that's KidsCan, and then we're moving on to the Young Persons Advisory Group. The Young Persons Advisory Group was sort of set up to provide a meeting place to talk about various aspects of research that involve young people. And so like the KidsCan, we meet on a monthly basis all year round. And the goal of these meetings was to take place in activities, gain knowledge and skills to enable us to, again, act as young ambassadors to create awareness not only of our group itself, but also of KidsCan as a whole. And then, so what we do on a monthly basis is we participate in activities related to KidsCan, including sort of design of documents about research, giving opinions about a study website, and then helping to format research ethics consent forms. And another thing we get to do is sort of discuss the outcomes that might be important for children and youth involved in clinical studies, and also to contribute to the design of monitoring tools for children and youth, to contribute to research ideas, priorities, and conducting surveys of young people's views on different clinical trials. And then finally, a big goal when the initiative was started was to be able to for the group to be able to conduct self-initiated research. So like kind of Katie said, is her last sort of the farthest on her range was that the youth actually get to start creating their own research. And so we're actually going to be able to start doing that in spring of 2021. And sort of a fun fact or sort of information about all the members a part of the committee is that they're all current or past patients that have been treated at a pediatric healthcare facility. They're all interested in learning more about healthcare and how youth can impact research. And most of them have had previous experience in a research study as a patient. Let me just do this. And so then finally, we'll be sort of moving more into the examples. So some of the projects that we've been able to be a part of, I have a list here. I'm not sure if all of them, I won't be speaking to specifically because I know that there's privacy before certain research studies are produced. So I'll just be sort of briefly talking about different things we've been able to do. So we've completed modules to gain a deeper understanding of clinical research and the process that researchers have gone through to get it approved and implemented. One of the first things we're able to do as a group is evaluate a gender fluidity survey for its level of vocabulary. We've worked with Dr. Elise Martin and Dr. Serena Orr on evaluating the level of vocabulary and the format of their pediatric migraine treatment preferences questionnaire. And that's a mouthful, but one big thing that we were able to do sort of more recently coming out of that is actually they've offered to allow some of our members to co-author this article, which again is a big step towards not only having youth a part of sort of the process of creating or implementing the research study, but also having them involved in the end product of producing the results. More recently, we have been able to complete a Porsche module on Patient Engagement 101, which I definitely suggest. As a group, we're able to look at it, but it's sort of geared towards clinicians, researchers, and just about anyone who wants to know more about how to engage patients. And so then another big thing is that this fall, we were able to attend the Children's Healthcare Canada conference, which was, we were able to be sponsored by MyCERN, which was a huge opportunity for us to be able to sort of hear from different researchers, to see what it's like to go to a big conference, and hear from a lot of different people from all over. And it really enabled us to learn more about current research and to participate as a youth voice in the conference, which I've had a chance to go the last 2 years. And I really found that there was a huge lacking of youth voices to be able to participate and sort of advocate during the conference. And then, like I mentioned earlier, we're going to be able to start conducting our own research on how psychiatry needs have changed with COVID-19. So I'm sort of going to move on to collaborations now, and I'll talk more later about why I separated projects from collaborations. So we've worked with Dr. Lauren Kelly and her team on the protocol investigating youth perspectives on medical cannabis research. And a big thing with this was that we actually met on numerous occasions, not just once, to sort of talk about the research proposal and then eventually the implementation. And so a big thing here is that they came to us right at the beginning when they were kind of coming up with the main ideas and coming up before they even submitted for funding. And so that was a big step for us, is to be able to, instead of just being sent research that's sort of already in the process or getting us to sort of evaluate things when they were in the end stages, is they really involved us right from the get-go of sorting their research. And another thing we did is we worked with Dr. Joanna McLean, give feedback on her obstructive sleep apnea project. She came to us again right from the get-go. She didn't even have her research yet fully developed. She came to us to sort of ask questions about what types of treatment we would prefer, what time is most convenient for youth and their families to come in for visits, or even for different treatment options. And then finally, how to she sort of asked us about the environment of where these types of tests currently have to take place, and if we had any ideas on how to actually like move those tests to being able to happen at home, and to even sort of make taking the tests and the environment that we took them in more comfortable. And so now I'm sort of going to share some tips and strategies for involving youth in research. So a major thing I want to say is that when you come to us, you got to be open to major and minor changes, and you never know what's going to come out of it. When you talk to us, when you get the feedback, is sometimes you're going to come in and we'll have small changes. If you come to us with a questionnaire and we say these words need to be changed here or there, or this question isn't clear, or you may come to us with your research project and we may say, like, may have big things to talk, we may have big things that we think need to change. And so sort of come to us open to all different sizes of changes within your research. And sort of Katie already talked about this, but a big thing is valuing the voices of youth because they have the lived experience that you may not. And very few people sort of underestimate this, but it's something very important to always remember. Next, big thing is that when you're coming with your research and you want to sort of get specific things out of it when you're talking to us, bring simple and direct questions to sort of get the feedback you're looking for. What I mean by this is sort of if you are looking to get feedback on the whole project as a whole, sometimes asking large questions, you're not necessarily going to get the responses you're looking for. And sort of, so if you're looking on input about the implementation of it, or about how the youth or are going to be involved in it, sort of have specific questions so that you can sort of get input slowly. And it's not that we are unable to sort of answer big questions, but sometimes it's a bit overwhelming when you come with large questions for us to answer all of them sort of all at the same time. Another big thing is to bring your projects and research to youth in the beginning stages. And so this will sort of tie into the first point, is that then you won't necessarily have major changes when you come to us. It's sort of, if you, as I talked about with our collaborations, is they came to us right from the get-go. They said, we're thinking about starting this study. We're thinking about sort of looking into these treatment options. We're looking into sort of finding out what time visits should happen, sort of what the setting should look like. And sort of, so before they even started the research, they were involving us to help them shape their research. And so that was really important in sort of helping them to create research that'll have the best outcomes possible, and to also sort of give us sort of the opportunity to see what it's like in the beginning stages of research starting, and then how it becomes sort of a research study that actually produces results in the end. And then a big thing, sort of Katie brought up compensation, but sort of the same thing, it doesn't necessarily have to be a big compensation, but bring incentives, because youth love gift cards or getting little sort of gifts, and we want to feel valued too. And a lot of us, it's our passion to sort of talk about research, talk about our experience, but we sort of do it for free. We sort of give our opinions and all of that for free. And it may be benefiting us in the future, sort of in our careers and our opportunities, but right now it doesn't necessarily give us a whole lot of ability to sort of pursue that in terms of money, and so like even a small gift card can sort of feel like a big thing to a lot of people. And then one big thing, and it may seem sort of, some people may be offended by it, or some people may be like, well, that's just what I needed at that point. That's totally okay. But a big thing I want to say is that youth do not always want to be involved in doing passive research tasks. So sort of when I talked about projects is sort of when people brought us a questionnaire that was already finished. We don't mind looking at the vocabulary. We don't mind sort of looking over it, but we'd really like to be involved in the whole process of creating the research and sort of working with you to sort of make the research sort of the best as possible. And also, yeah, and sort of when I say passive research task is another big thing, which I'm just sort of remembering now, is that when you're going to bring us a task, the big thing is that come and meet with us. And so we love meeting you. We love sort of speaking with you face to face. And so some of the researchers would sort of send us a questionnaire, but not actually meet with us. And so sometimes you'll see the minutes at the end, sort of the feedback you'll get back from the youth, but you will have missed the sort of thought process that went in between and sort of hearing how the youth sort of had a conversation between themselves to get to the feedback that they actually provide you with in the end. Next thing I want to talk about is enabling youth as advisors. And this is a big thing, is that youth advisors who are able to actually find a group to connect with are lucky enough to actually find one, because there aren't a lot of opportunities out there, or it's very hard to find them. And so when youth are actually able to find a group, you want to really utilize those resources and really sort of enable them to share as much as possible. And so a big thing is create opportunities for engagement and participation. So when you're creating your research, sort of create opportunities for youth to be involved in it right from the get-go, and sort of plan in opportunities for other people to sort of weigh in, or to be, I know that a lot of people will be participating in the clinical research at the end, and then producing results at the end, but really try to create opportunities for not just the research participants, the clinical research participants to be a part of it, but also for advisors to be a part of it. Another big thing is give feedback on how the youth voices and opinions changed and shaped your clinical research to the benefit of your patients and the research outcomes. And that may seem like, oh, sort of boost our egos a bit, tell us how good we were. But what we really mean by that is we want to sort of hear about how we were able to contribute to your research. And it sort of gives us, it'll encourage us to voice our opinions more and more, and to sort of find more opportunities and to voice them as often as possible. And then another sort of, I keep saying big things, but this the second last bullet is update the advisors on the progress of your research. A lot of times us as our groups or us individually have to sort of chase down researchers and say, like, I'd love to know what happens in the end, and sort of we express that, and then we end up having to sort of chase after them and say, I know the research is done now, would you mind updating me? And so we love hearing about sort of the outcomes, to educate us sort of on sort of research that's sort of in the process, that's been completed, and also to inform us sort of on actually the outcomes of the survey, because a lot of us are curious, especially if we're going to go into a career like that in the future. We're curious about how that's actually, we're curious about it. I'm looking at the time now, realizing that I went really long, so I'm going to try to finish it up really quickly. Then consult with youth as often as possible to make them feel useful and to keep them up to date. And then how to connect with us. I'm going to paste these resources in the chat too, so you can get in contact with us if you're looking to engage with a group that if you aren't currently involved with a group. And then also, if you want to know more about us and our organization, you can follow any of these links. And then thank you for listening to my presentation. I noticed it went really long, but I hope you got something useful out of it.
Thanks so much, Kate. Hey, I have your poll here. Should we just launch it and see after the fact what the results are?
Sure.
Okay, so this would be for those that are conducting research. The poll is, have you consulted with youth when developing clinical research? I see the, so it's like a horse race. It's at a 50-50. Oh, interesting. Well, I hope that I'm sure that Kate's talk has probably enlightened those that have said no on some ideas for engaging youth in research. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Kate. That was an awesome seg into the slides that I'm going to share, and no issues at all on taking a bit of extra time, because I think you've just really presented some really great practical advice for people. So thank you so much for sharing what you have here. I'm just going to get my slides to slideshow. So I've got my Twitter handle there, as well as Clinical Trials Ontario's Twitter handle. And I'm going to follow up on Kate's awesome presentation on really practical things about engaging youth and caregivers, and follow along the same lines for you. So in case you're not familiar with Clinical Trials Ontario, just really briefly, really our mandate is to help make the environment in Ontario a great place to do clinical trials. We've got 3 strategic pillars in order to do that. And my pillar that I'm charged with delivering on is the engage pillar. So we use the word with in our engagement pillar really strategically. So I'm charged with supporting and promoting public and patient engagement with clinical trials. Again, with can mean different things. Here we mean it to be helping people make decisions about their participation in clinical trials, if that makes sense for them or not, but helping them find that information to support that, as well as engaging with them as partners or collaborators in clinical trials, just like Kate and Katie have talked about earlier today. So I'm going to share some specific resources that we've developed in this area that hopefully will be helpful for you. So I'm going to talk specifically about a project that's led by Dr. Monica Perry out of the University of Toronto. It's called the PEP study, and our Twitter handle is there as well. We've been funded over the years partially by CHR SPORE, by the Ontario SPORE Support Unit, and most recently by a CIHR project grant. The team walks the talk of engaging patient partners. So we've got the names of everyone there. And hey, you don't know who the patient partners are unless we tell you who they are, which is actually, part of how we operate. Is we have purposefully not put titles or initials after people's names, but we've got 4 patient partners who are part of the team. We've got trainees, we've got clinicians and researchers, and other folks who bring other specialties. So just briefly, this is to show you that this has been an ongoing project that we've worked on for a number of years now, and we've really worked hard to engage our community. So those who do clinical trials, as well as we've done a lot of engagement with the health charities and patient organizations that we work with at Clinical Trials Ontario as well. You can find our decision aids a few different places on our website. And one of the places is under our Patients and Public tab, under Resources for Engaging Patients. And this is the link here. And I'm actually going to just briefly for a few minutes take you to the link so that I can walk you through things. I'm also going to share it in the chat. So if it's easier for you to to look through it on your own here, I'm happy for you to do that. And I think just given our timing, I'm just going to briefly walk you through things here. So this is one of the places, this is the landing page for our decision aids for engaging patient partners with your clinical trial project. In case you're not familiar with healthcare decision aids, they are resources that help patients and their providers walk through different ways to make a decision about something related to their healthcare. And so we've designed these decision aids to be around patient partner engagement with clinical trials or clinical research, quite honestly, designed around a typical way that a decision aid would be seen in a healthcare setting. So we've got two different decision aids, one's for patient partners and one's for investigators or sponsors. So I'm going to take you to the investigator decision aid, and they're really set up the same way. They're set up with an introduction to patient engagement, patient-oriented research, some of the things that Katie has presented to you today. Next, you go on to priorities, and this is going to be individual for different investigators based on how they see themselves engaging patient partners and what they feel their needs are with respect to clinical trials. So actually, I'll just briefly click on each section here. So they're all kind of set up the same way too, that as you scroll down them, there's frequently asked questions related to that specific area, as well as some answers for you. So when you click on them, it'll open up like a regular FAQ. So this is kind of just an introduction, getting you started. The next one around my priorities, here we built it based on the research process. So maybe you're more interested in engaging people in the design of your research. So they're interactive and you can click and move them. Maybe it's developing your grant proposal. So maybe it's not funded research yet, but you want to engage, like Kate said, best practices to engage people right from the get-go. And maybe you think that you're going to also involve people in the dissemination work once your grant gets funded and once you've started the work. So basically, I ask you to reflect on how you think you're going to engage with people. Katie's already introduced you to this International Association for Public Participation levels of engagement, and that's what this section asks you about, is to what degree do you foresee yourself being engaged with patient partners? And we're going to go for the gusto. We're going to say you're going to let them make all the decisions in collaboration with you here. And so the program is going to remember your selections here as you continue to work through things. So the next step is learn more. And again, we've developed the learn more to be developed around the research process. So here you would basically just look at the areas in which you think you're going to engage your patient partners. So sorry, I've just got to move stuff on my screen so I can see this better. So let's go to developing the grant proposal. So here you've got really specific questions and areas that will provide really practical information and advice for you, like budgeting for compensation. Once you've decided that you've learned what you need to know here, just like a traditional decision aid, you're going to be asked to reflect again. And again, this is super interactive. You're going to review what you thought were your main priorities at the start. You're going to review your level of engagement. And then you're going to answer some questions that ask you to reflect. I've already pre-filled them out here. And based on the answers to my questions, the quiz tells me I'm probably ready to engage with patient partners. And then again, like a traditional decision aid, you go on, it still is allowing you opportunities for reflection. It brings in the results from your My Readiness quiz. And then again, it asks you to reflect. And you might be thinking, why are you reflecting so much? Why are you answering all these questions? But I'm hoping from Katie and Kate's talk, you've seen there's a lot to consider here. And I always like to remind people that patients are bringing not just their aspirations into this, but they're bringing their lives to your research project. So we really want you to be mindful when you do engage. I'm not saying you shouldn't engage, but I just really want you to spend some time and energy to be mindful. And so again, you'll go through these questions and it'll give you a response. It'll give you some organizations you might go to if you're looking for patient partners. And I'd be happy to add my CERN. I'd be happy to add, Kate, some of the groups that you're involved with here too, so that we can expand some of these. So that's just like, I feel like the Tasmanian devil here, that's the whirlwind overview of the decision aids. And I just briefly want to bring you back to my slides for a second. And I basically want to say that, you know, there's other resources too that we have. And so if that's a bit overwhelming, like some of the groups that Kate's involved with, we have what's called our College of Lived Experience. So I'll just put a little plug out for our college. They're 24 people from across Ontario. They're different ages. They live in different settings. They have different experiences with health, healthcare, and research. And they really want to be engaged. And so this is a group that most everything within our engagement pillar at CTO, we've engaged them in using all kinds of practices like you've heard today. And if you want to kind of dip your toes in the water here, I'd be happy to talk to you about engaging them with some of your work. We've set things up so that we can help facilitate, we can help get you going, and then you can take things on from there. So, and lastly, again, here's my information for you in case you'd like to reach out. I'm always happy to answer any questions and get on a call with you to share some other resources that we have or answer any questions for you. So I think with that, I'm going to pass it back to Stephen because I know we've got a few minutes for discussion, but I think it's safe to say that Katie, Kate, and myself are happy to answer any questions after the webinar too. Thanks very much.
Great. Thank you very much, Dawn. Thank you, Katie and Kate. I just put a comment in the chat. If anybody has a question, feel free to enter it in the chat if you're also able to unmute and ask verbally.